Well, howdy, Bree here, and I hear you're trying to start a romance novel. That's pretty exciting, but maybe you don't really know where to start or even how to start organizing where to start. Well, I've got you covered, friend. That's what this video is all about. The 5 most important starter documents, plus a couple of bonus ones, that I think are going to set you up for success and make sure that your romance novel is not only hot, steamy, and full of lovin', but also easy to follow for you while you draft. Now, in case you want even more advice, because there's not just 5 documents that start out every great novel, we actually have a full workbook that is available on our Substack for paid subscribers, so check the link in the description for that. But in the meantime, I think this is going to be a really great place for you to start. Number 1, the dump doc. The first rule of the dump doc is that there is no judgment in the dump doc. The dump doc is how I start every project, not just romance novels, but essentially it is the document where it all begins. This is where the first spark of the thing that excites you about this idea should go, and where any other random thought in your brain that maybe fits with this project will just sort of dump out of you, all in one place. There is no organization, no inherent structure. It's just the place where you are allowed to be excited about this thing that you're starting. Not everything in the dump doc is eventually going to make it elsewhere, but it is an essential part of the early brainstorming process to just have a place of unfettered creativity and excitement to just put absolutely everything that maybe you want to include here all in one place. But as the dump doc starts to attempt an evolution, then it's time to use it as a jumping off point for your next couple of documents. Document number 2, character templates. Technically, this isn't one document, especially if you're working on a romance. Even if you're writing a single POV romance, you kind of gotta develop your romance people in tandem with each other to make sure that they're good narrative foils for one another. But regardless, character templates is next. Now, there's a lot of great character templates online, maybe even one from a familiar place very soon. But for now, just look up a couple options, see which one vibes with you, maybe even use the Scrivener base version. They have a starting template in their novel format that might be a good start. One way that I like to stress test my character templates and characters, specifically in a romance novel, is using this thing called GMC grids. So GMC grids are goal, motivation, conflict grids. I'll link in the description to a kind of longer explanation, but essentially this is a good way of seeing, like, not just do the characters make internal sense for themselves, but in a romance, do these characters make sense together? Do they have enough in common, either at opposite ends of a spectrum or at the same point in a spectrum, so that they will be a fulfilling narrative falling in love with each other versus just like a good match if they were your friends in real life. Character templates also has another sub-document, secret, off the list. And this is just a document called character names, because I don't know about you, but I frequently spend a lot of my time going back 60, 70 pages of a manuscript draft trying to figure out, did I name this character's uncle? And if so, what is that character's name? I shouldn't have to be spending my time doing that. That's not a good use of my time. So what I do is, before I actually start these days, I make a document just for character names so that I can go check my document as I'm writing, and if there is a name there, great, I know what it is, and any significant descriptions. And if I don't have anything there, also great, because now I can make one up and add it. Document number 3 is a timeline. So similar to that character names document of just like keeping track of when people get named in the book, so I don't have 8 different names for the same uncle character, the timeline is a document that is more useful in some drafts than others, especially if you're working with like a very concentrated period of time or a time-locked structure. So that means like everything needs to happen before Thanksgiving, but it starts in September, or this has to happen in one semester, 1 week, whatever it is. Like if there is some kind of timeline that you need to stick to for the purposes of your narrative and your plot, then a timeline document is really helpful, because sometimes you're like, okay, the next chapter can't happen the day after. Like I need them to have a week to do their fight montage or whatever. If you're not keeping track of how long it takes your characters to do stuff, then if you have some kind of external thing that may impact stuff, it is helpful to know, how long has this taken so far? Because either you need to condense the timeline a little more, maybe there shouldn't be a whole week of fight montages, but just 2 days, or it may open up an opportunity of like, oh, I've written up to Thanksgiving break. This is actually a cool opportunity because now I can use Thanksgiving break for something in the plot. Now that I know what the timeline of the book is, I can use that timeline to my advantage. The fourth most important starting document that I have found, especially for romance, is some kind of epistolary element. Now, for different books of mine, I will choose a different one. For other books of mine, these are like really important to the plot because the plot revolves around like a bucket list or a New Year's resolutions list or a particular email or news article. But in other cases, it's just fun as a character exercise because as an epistolary freak who wrote my college thesis on epistolary novels, I just really love primary source documents as a way of revealing who people really are at their core, especially in context of like, what is the primary source document created for? Because there's a very big difference between what people write in like a private journal than they do in a work email to a colleague. And I find that kind of dichotomy really interesting, especially again, when you're working in romance where so much of the tension is going to come from like, what do these characters actually say to each other versus what do they actually think? So some examples of epistolary elements that either you could use in the book itself or just as brainstorming are things like social media posts and emails, journals or diaries, or even private blogs, perhaps if they write under a pseudonym. I just think they're fun. Number 5, questions I need answered. So this is a little bit of a dump doc, but it's a dump doc that is created after I've started drafting, because oftentimes as I'm writing, things start to occur to me that maybe don't have an immediate impact on the plot, but are things that I do eventually need to figure out. So I just start a list of non-rhetorical questions that at some point I should come back to and answer about the work that I'm on. So I don't start writing until I have a pretty comprehensive outline, which will certainly be the subject of a future video / Substack blog, but I do occasionally have holes in that outline. Because while I'm thinking high level, when I really get into the nitty gritty, sometimes motivations that I kind of took for granted at the outline stage maybe can't be taken for granted at the actual drafting stage. So that's where I start asking myself questions like, why doesn't this person say yes to this proposal? Because now that I'm in it, it kind of makes sense for her to say yes to the proposal, but for plot reasons, she can't say yes. So I'll put that in my questions I need answered doc, and then I'll just keep going because I know that this thing has to happen. There simply isn't any way around it, but I currently don't love my justification. So I throw that in there. Other times I will be, writing something maybe a little bit more sci-fi or fantasy and come up against like a contradiction in my world building or a hole in the world building. So things like, what do they call it when somebody does this? Or is it possible to divorce a fated mate? And what does that process look like? The great thing about questions I need answered as a document is that when you hit kind of a wall, if you're at a writer's block point or you're just like not feeling super motivated to draft, that's a good document to just go through and answer because I find it really helpful and freeing when I'm in a position where I don't really feel like creating new stuff. Just answer questions. Just do a BuzzFeed quiz, but for your own book where you just get to respond and react rather than having to like create wholesale from within yourself. So this is not just a great starter document to create and to keep an eye on as you draft, but it's also a great writer's block buster. So there you go. Those are all of the starter documents that I use to organize my romance writing process. Now, those are the 5 most important ones, but there are other ones that in some ways are equally as important and in other ways are even more in-depth in their supporting the writing process for romance. So if you would like access to that workbook of the full suite of stuff you need to write sweet romance novels, then you should become a paid subscriber of the Rogue MFA over on Substack. You'll find that link in the video description. Specifically, you will find that workbook in the paid portion of the blog version of this video, and I think you're gonna like it because not only will you have access to that, but you'll also get access to all of our other templates, past and future, if you become a paid subscriber. So I hope to see you there. Thanks for being here, and I will talk to you soon.